I was like, I could deal with this. I could deal with that. I could deal with this. And then this thing happened. And I'm just like, I'm telling you, like, I'm just like, it triggered something that has been resting, I think, dormant inside of me, which is that, you know what, there's a lot of shit that's not okay, including this. And obviously, I'm not able to change this. Like, I can't wave a magic wand and make this different. But there are things about my life and the way I'm being and the way I'm behaving that I can make different. And I think that I think that these conversations call people to action to say, why don't you take a look at this and consider if the way you're going about your life is really the way you want to be going about it.
This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte.
Identifying your blocks and demystifying your struggles
so that you can claim your own path
and make your life a work of art.
Sometimes, Evan, you're just over it. You were just over it, you know, with all the shit that's been going on with 2020. There gets to a point sometimes where you just got to be like, I'm just done. I'm done with this, and I don't even know what that means, what lessons there are to learn from that. But I've hit my wall. I'm done. I'm over it. Like, it's just like moving on. Things got to change. Something's got to happen. And I don't know what else to say about it, but I'll get into a little bit, because it's not just COVID. It's just the whole year of 2020 and all the stuff that has happened. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who can relate, but it's like, there's a point, and I think we all hit it. We're like, I'm over this shit.
Yeah, man. Well, you're definitely in good company. You know, I think that probably most people in pretty much everywhere in the world is probably encountered that a couple of times over the course of this year of I'm just over it. And for all you listeners out there, like, just in case anyone had any illusions about anything, you know, Brandon and I are just human beings, and, you know, we just try and get into certain conversations that are often very, 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 very relevant for us and our struggles that we're having. And so we just decide to talk about it because, you know, lots of people probably struggle with similar things, and we're not necessarily, we're not just here to preach at you and to lecture like we've got all of the answers. Sometimes you've just got to dive into something, and you've got to wrestle with something, and you've got to rumble with something for a little while. You know, that's how you extract and learn and move forward. Is, you know, there's no ignoring it. There's no pretending like it's not going on. It's going on. It's happening. This is what the reality of our experience, and we've got to just confront it, you know. Not necessarily in fisticuffs, because sometimes when you confront something, it demands a gentle touch, you know, but sometimes it does. It demands like sometimes you got to just manhandle something that you're working through. But yeah, no, this conversation could go in so many different directions, and I'm excited to see where we roll with it.
Yeah. Usually I would take the position of the peaceful warrior. You know, like, stay zen, collect your thoughts, like, be in yourself. Don't let the external world upset you or affect you. But the other day I was just like, fuck this. I don't know how else to put it. I was just like, you know, I do all these practices. I'm really good at being on my own. I'm really good at staying centered. And, you know, it probably doesn't sound like it based on this, share, but really, honestly, I do think there's an important point to just say, like, no, enough is enough. I'm done. Like, I'm tired of this. And I think the hard part is you can hit that point, and there are certain things that you obviously are not able to control. You know, you don't get to just change them and make them different. But I think the thing that I'm realizing as we're talking, even just starting this conversation, is like, something in me is going to change. whether I like it or not. Because I doing life the way that I'm doing it and just kind of letting this be water if it ducks back, water if it ducks back, like over and over. I'm just like, I've had enough. I don't know how else to describe it. And it's making me really consider or reconsider how I do my life and what I deem important or unimportant, or what I think can wait, and what, you know, what's acceptable. And I think the big thing that I'm realizing is like, there's certain things that they're not going to wait anymore. There's certain things that, you know, there's certain ways of being that I'm not going to hold off on anymore. You know, it's like, it's kind of like you look back on your life. Some people might say like, I wish I had more ice cream. Well, you know, like I think there's a certain part of you that can be like, I wish I told more people to fuck off. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like that's the kind of change that I'm almost feeling that I need in myself. It's like, you know, quit putting up with this stuff. And I feel like the environment, like what's going on in the world, is just a more of a macro version of what's going on maybe in my own personal life. And that's why I've hit this point. But, you know, it's this kind of like, it has been brewing. There's been some good stuff happening. Like, for example, I have been making a stand with people when they're saying shit that's out of line, like racist stuff or whatever. And I've been doing that. And I feel like I'm getting stronger that way, and I'm not like letting things slide. But I feel like there's this whole next level that I'm about to step into, where it's like, for example, something that I've been doing recently has been, people ask questions that's none of their fucking business. And I mean, I know I'm swearing a lot off the top, but I don't even give them a direct answer. I'm like, what? You know what? I'm not going to give you an answer. I'm not going to tell you this personal shit about me just because you asked. It's like, there's certain things that I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, enough is enough. It's like, I'm not an open book for everybody in every way. And I feel like as an artist, it's kind of like, you're always trying to give, you're always trying to bring your all to everything. And I think there's a certain part of it where it's like, nah, this is for me. You know what? This is for me, and this is what I want. And you don't get to be a part of that unless you get invited into my circle, you know, my inner circle. And there's certain information, like, it's just like people will ask stuff and it's like, next question. You know what I mean? Or don't even give them an answer, give them a vague answer. Like, because it's like, and I know this seems a little bit off topic, but I guess I'm saying this, I always try and speak to my younger self when I have these conversations with you. In a weird way, I'm always trying to talk to that kid that's 17. And I'm just like, dude, you got some stuff that you care about. You don't have to tell everybody your dreams. You don't have to tell them your plans. You don't have to, just because they ask, how's it going for you? It's fine. It's good. You know, you don't need to know any more about it. Like, what are you up to? Don't worry about it. I don't need to tell you all this stuff that I'm doing, you know, like, what are you trying to prove? You know what I'm saying? And I feel like, you know, as an artist, I'm just like, enough is enough. I'm tired of being challenged. I'm tired of people infringing on my zone. I'm tired of the environment infringing on my zone. I don't even know what I'm saying right now to some degree, but I'm like, you know what I mean? I'm just like, I'm hitting a wall and things are changing.
Well, man, it's that you just sound like a person who's over it.
Yeah,
who's
I'm over it.
Hence the conversation, hence the topic. I mean, there's so many things that I think that we can extract on, you know, with what you said and maybe elaborate on. Like, part of what you're talking about to me is boundaries. It sounds like putting up good boundaries for yourself, whether that's with other people or sometimes boundaries from yourself. We've talked about boundaries before. But
definitely boundaries. You're right. That's a big part of this. It's like, it's boundaries with myself and with people. And I feel like it goes even beyond that. I feel like we talked about boundaries before, but we really kind of kept it very micro, like about people and about just how to have a certain amount of self-respect and whatever. But I feel like this is beyond that. This is like,
no, absolutely.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
I think it's just one element of this whole thing, of this whole feeling of just being fucking over it, because there's just so much, you know. That's why I really, because you said that to me in our sort of pre-talk before we started recording, was, you know, I said that's it, you know, like there's something in that feeling of being over it, because there's so much in it. Like, there's there's a kind of, and I hope I'm not prying into you too much, Brandon, but but I mean, there's obviously there's this sense of anger, there's a sense of frustration, there's a sense of disappointment. There's all kinds of things that are tied up in over it. And I mean, this is something that the audience wasn't sort of privy to, but one of the things that you had said was that, like, you were building all of these new things into your life, like all these new sort of routines and disciplines, really to uphold the kind of person that you are and the kind of person that you want to be, which we've talked about before with like practice and discipline and all of these things, all of those wonderful things that are coming from a genuine place of doing these things because they have a real value to yourself. And then even when you are doing those things, sometimes life still has another plan that's going to happen. Like you were saying, like where you live, like the city that you live in had this big fire down at its docks, and this fire released all of these toxic chemicals into the air that literally made like makes the air unbreathable. Like you're one step away from where they actually classify that you need to be wearing a gas mask to be breathing the air.
Yeah.
Like that's intense. And
that's 2020 for you.
And when you're trying to like take on an exercise routine where you go for a jog, suddenly you're like, well, what the shit, Yeah. And not everybody has a treadmill, or a space to put a treadmill. It's like, what do you do? Like you sometimes, like, even when we are doing the good things, there's something that can happen that's out of our control, and when these things happen that are out of our control, that can have a really deep effect on us, and sometimes, and I think this is something that you were also touching on, is that sometimes that effect is something, like we're just like, it's fine. Like, I'm fine. Everything's fine. It's kind of shitty, but, but it's fine.
Like, it's not fucking fine.
Yeah. Until you just hit a point where it's just like, this thing gets encroached on and this thing gets encroached on, and then another thing and another thing and another thing. And then you've had it, you're over it. And you're like, when does this wheel begin to turn in my direction, in the little ways and the big ways? So, I mean, this is everything that we're talking about and more, I'm sure. So yeah, I just kind of want to just throw all of that sort of sentiment into the ring to add some flavor and context to what we're talking about here.
Yeah. I'm a firm believer too that when you're not able to change the world or others around you, like when you're not able to influence or affect that, at least not immediately, even if you can, but it's going to take time. The key thing is to change yourself. You got to figure out how you're going to change you. And I think that when the world is throwing you curveballs and it's messing up your plans, it's very easy to respond with like, fuck it all. Like, I don't care at all. And I'm definitely battling with that myself right now. And I'm sure a lot of people have been this year. I mean, I really feel that a lot of people have dealt with that. Like, well, fuck it. Like, who gives a shit anymore? You know what I mean? Or at least for now, until this passes. Yeah. And I think that that's a good temporary strategy sometimes. Like, it's necessary temporarily, but I think in the long run, it just ends up hurting you. So you got to figure out what are you going to do? How are you going to be different? How are you going to change in the face of this? And I've said before on the podcast, I think sometimes a little bit of anger is a good thing. I mean, anger appropriated the right way, with the right energy and the right direction, can be passion.
Yeah.
But I think
anger, like, I think that's like kind of like anger, can be either creative or destructive.
Yes.
You can go both ways with that, and I mean, one of them is obviously a more usually a more tempting and
Yeah.
easier way to go with it. But when anger is channeled creatively, it's passion.
Yes, totally. And I think a lot of time people don't like anger because most people take the easy road with it. They get destructive and they damage something or hurt somebody with it,
Or
they,
internalize it.
or they internalize it and it hurts them. It's one of those things where I think anger can be healthy when it's creative and when it's turned into passion. And I think sometimes anger is what shakes you from the comfort that you're in and the things that like there's certain, I think everybody has this to some degree. There's certain expectations we all kind of have and we kind of live by them. And then all of a sudden some kind of thing gets thrown in the wheel, right? And it messes everything up. And now your expectations aren't met. Like, for example, this year, 2020, was a lot of people had plans, to travel, to do something, to make something, to build that relationship this year or whatever. And all of a sudden it's like, you shouldn't be talking to people. You should be hiding away in your house. Basically you go outside, you could die or you could contribute to someone else dying. And some people are just like, fuck it, I don't care, like whatever. And they could be contributing to more of that. And there's a whole lot of things going on, right? And then that's making it worse for other people. And those other people are angry because they're following the rules, but other people aren't. And, like it's one of those things where I think there's a lot to be angry about. And there's a lot angry about the situation itself. And I'm not just talking about COVID. I mean, there's all sorts of other things, right? But like angry at the people because they're not behaving the way that you want them to, or the way you expect they should, or you think is right. And there's this tendency, I think, for people to want to hurt and destroy and make people wrong and be right. And I think when you feel that anger, I think although there is some justification in having those thoughts and having those feelings, I think you've got to like stop before you act on that. And you got to look at like, okay, what can I do to make my life masterful, make my life a piece of art here? Because in spite of this darkness, we talked about this on the other podcast about beauty. And I shared this image of a flower that was coming up in the middle of an apocalypse. And I feel like that's what passion is in a lot of ways. It's this like life that is found in the midst of like terrible things going on. And I think for me, the thing that I'm looking for right now is as pissed off as I am and as just over it as I am, I'm trying to be the flower. I'm trying to be that thing that's gonna grow and not die off with everything else just because everything else is dying, and like it's a weird thing, it's like, but what is that life, and I think there is something in that. I don't necessarily know what it is because this is all very raw and new at the moment. But I mean, my hope is that by sharing it, there'll be someone else out there who's feeling that. And maybe even if they listen to this years and years in the future, they're feeling that in whatever they're going through in their life. And they connect with this and go, yeah, I could do something with that. That's my hope. That's my small attempt to make a flower in the apocalypse, if you want to call it.
Well, I mean, the flower begins deep in the soil,
right?
With no sunlight,
Yeah.
that it's really touching. But interestingly enough, the flower knows that the sun is out there, and it pushes out there and it pushes out because it knows,
right?
But yeah, that journey begins in the dark. That journey begins in a soil, but that's the soil is where there's all of this, the richness, all of these nutrients, all of the materials that are needed for something beautiful to begin. And we've talked about this many times before too. Like even in our stories reflect that kind of a metaphor so often about these incredible things that come out from dark places. Sometimes the darkest of places is where we find tremendous wisdom. I mean, again, it comes down to what we choose to do with those materials, that we've been provided, because we do get a choice in all of that. And it's not always an easy thing to do. And I would say that there's even plenty of room for us to, you know, pound our fists into the ground and be angry and to feel defeated at times. Like that's, as you said so often, is that, that's where you are. Like that's where you are. There's no sense in trying to pretend that you're somewhere else. That's not serving you in any way whatsoever. You're just delaying the inevitable thing, and maybe that's part of where this whole over it comes from, because over it is like, like the straw that broke the camel's back. Like you're not just cruising along like totally like fine and blissful, and then you're immediately just over it. Over it is a buildup.
Yes.
It's a buildup of like this thing and then this thing and then this thing. Oh, and then this thing still and this thing still. Oh, and now this thing. It's like over it. I'm just over it, right? And we are affected by things that happen, and we like to pretend. I'm very much guilty of this. I like to go along like everything is okay. Like I'm not bothered by certain things. I'm the type of person that if I'm not careful, will live in an idealized state rather than my actual state. So I'm feeling angry and frustrated about something, but I'll say to myself, well, you shouldn't feel that way. You're not supposed to feel that way. Because I have this ideal sense of the state to be in, and the type of and an image of a person that I want to be, and all, and some of that has value. That gives, it's like, yeah, I have a state of being and a type of person that I'm trying to be in my life, and trying to be more of certain qualities and traits in my life. But it doesn't mean that I can just ignore the things that aren't that, if that's the reality of the situation. It's just like, shit. It's like, yeah, you don't want to feel angry right now. I know you don't want to feel this way, but that's how you feel.
Yeah.
That's how you feel. And when we ignore that, and when we try and live in that idealized image and state of ourselves, we're just making this whole trip take way longer than is necessary, because you're eventually going to have to come to that place, where you're just like, oh, okay, I guess I'm actually really angry about that thing that happened. And sometimes it feels foolish.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm angry about things, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, I know this is so stupid for me to feel this way about this thing, because it's so not important, but it is what it is. Like and so if I can begin there, then I can actually begin to look at it and understand it, to learn how to actually let it go, as opposed to just blithely, like, basically it's just a little bit better than ignoring something.
Yeah.
In some ways it's worse, because it's like, it's not like you're ignorant of it, it's just like you're cognitive of it, but you're choosing to just avoid it anyhow.
Yeah, I think avoidance is not the right answer a lot of the time. It's, I think avoidance is not the right way. Acceptance is really important. And I think you can be angry and accept that you feel angry for a moment and be like, well, it's silly to do something with this. Because I kind of look at anger, although I've been very much on this podcast, at least the way I talk about it is I'm like very like pro anger, like feel your anger, but that's because I think that a lot of people suppress it. And what I'm saying is, I don't think you should suppress it and avoid it. I think you should acknowledge it, but I also don't think you should go around having temper tantrums. And
Yeah.
there's a part of me that, I suppressed anger for a long time in my life, and I was really angry, and I had a lot to be angry about if people heard my story. And when people do, they often, they're often like, well, why didn't you do this thing? Or, well, like, how did you handle that? And it's like, there's a certain kind of like anger doesn't even sum it up. It's like furious. It's rage, like you're bubbling, like your blood is boiling anger. It's scary anger, put it that way. And when you don't know how to deal with it, and you don't know how to have it like be healthy expression of it, and you don't know, you don't have anybody telling you that it's okay that you feel this way, and that that's actually a very natural response, and that it's human. And
we're all about being human on this show.
Right, exactly. so there's this part of you that's trying to like take this part of you and not let it be. And that's a struggle. It becomes this fight. And I think that a healthy expression of anger, a healthy confrontation of it, is very healing. It's very cathartic, and it's part of the evolving process of the human being. It's part of you, letting out part of yourself that doesn't always get the floor. And it's all about how you do it, though, because when people have a tantrum, they're not really being angry. They're trying to control something. And usually they're trying to control something that they don't control. So tantrums are dumb. They're like a child gets angry and says, give me the candy. And I'm all upset and cries and does all the things for mommy or daddy to give them the candy. And it's like, that's just a temper tantrum. And sometimes people think that works because they had parents that just gave into it, right? And so they think the rest of the world will. Until you run across, in environments or circumstances that are just like, no, I don't care if you're having a temper tantrum. Like, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to give you your candy. I'm not going to give you what you want. And then the person who's having the temper tantrum just looks like a stupid child, like a really spoiled brat, right? So I think that anger, it's one of those things that our society and our culture, in my opinion, we suppress it a lot. We tell each other, you're not supposed to have that. That's dangerous. We tell it's like inappropriate. It's embarrassing. It's all these things. And I think that as an evolving culture, as evolving humanity, we have to learn how to accept anger and accept that every single person in this world has it. I don't care how zen you are. Anger is a part of the human experience, and we need to make space for it and have grace for it. And what that looks like is very foreign to most people. When I say that, how many people out there actually have a good idea of how you do that? Probably very few. So that's something we're going to have to learn. And I mean, I'm finding with myself, I'm learning to have a relationship with it. And I want to share one last thing about that. When I went through a depressed period and it was really bleak and dark, the breaking point was when I finally, for the first time, let some anger come out. And I didn't let it out on anybody. I just let it out as a sound. And I remember the catharsis of just like having like a primal growl of like, and let that out. And I remember the euphoria my body suddenly felt. And I was like, oh my God, it just hit me. I'm depressed because I'm so angry and I have no way of expressing myself. That's the depression. That's the repression. So weirdly enough, anger needed to come out before I could be joyful. But I think it's very, very important that when that anger comes out, you don't do it to hurt anybody or control anybody. Because when I started letting my anger out, I didn't, like, most people would have not known I was doing it, because I was finding ways to express it in healthy ways, because I didn't want to hurt anybody and I didn't want to try and control anyone, because that's really where my anger came from. I felt hurt. I felt controlled. So I didn't want to take my anger and do that to someone else, but I wanted to like let it out of my body. And when I did, man, I started feeling joyful again. And that was a big part of my healing process.
Yeah, man, there's so many things that we can take a path on with what you just said. I mean, I think the first thing that I want to get into is which I really just want to piggyback off of, because you kind of already said it, but I want to dive into it a little more specifically, is, you're talking about how anger is this thing in our society. Anger is such a weird thing in our society and our culture, because it's something that we're not okay with. It's something that we are sort of shamed about. But yet at the same time, just look at our media, look at television and movies full of anger and violence, like it's, which is in a way, it's part of how we have a healthy expression of it, because I think, like you were saying, like, people are just so fucking angry. I think a lot of people don't realize just how angry they are about a million different things, but there's just this feeling, there's just this emotion, and it finds a way out. And again, if we can find creative outlets for it, which is the beauty of the arts, but it's not necessarily just in arts. It can be found in sport, like how many stories have we heard about, like, pro boxers, pro fighters who are just like, they would have ended up dead, to the violence that existed in their neighborhood or whatever it was, but they found something to channel that anger through. Not even just fighters, but like any kind of athlete. You'll find that there's this thing, there's like, sports was a place to channel anger in a healthy way, to put that energy into doing something.
And that can build I just want to say that can build a discipline, right? Because you get passionate about a practice or discipline, and you continually do that. And the emotion is what got you to kind of build the habit, but eventually maybe you don't need the anger anymore, and you do it because you actually enjoy it and because you're good at it, right? But anger can sometimes be the thing to get you there.
Absolutely. And like, if you just like that story of Michael Jordan, if people haven't watched that Michael Jordan documentary on Netflix, oh my God.
The Last Dance.
The Last Dance. So good. And like, that was a guy who just used anger, to work for him, in productive ways.
Yeah.
But so I just want to bring this back around. There's, like you said, there's this thing in our culture where anger is kind of this shameful thing. And it's found this expression in all of these different ways. But I think, unfortunately, for many, many, many of us, people haven't found outlets for that thing. Like you and I, we have this conversation right now. This is an outlet for this very topic, for us to kind of exercise these things. But not everybody has this, and not everybody, I think, sees the importance of it. And maybe if there's anything to walk away from, is that if you don't have an outlet for when you have this feeling of like, I'm just fucking over it, you need to find something, because it's going to go somewhere. And unfortunately for most of us, it turns inwards. Like what we were talking about before, it's like, it turns inwards. It just goes in, like, as it turns into self-hatred, not enough. Self-worth is just like in the shitter. And something else that we had talked about before we started recording as well was just like this loneliness. There's a loneliness, there's a hell that comes with that anger that's just turned inwards, because when you don't have a place to express it, like, it's like you're looking out the window and you're like, oh God, there's these forest fires and the sky is all crappy, and then there's this other fire, I can't even breathe the air, and COVID, oh my God, I still get, like, there's still all of these things that are just have kind of kiboshed a lot of our plans, a lot of the things that we wanted to do. And it's so understandable for for this to just start eating away and eating away, and something to just start building up and building up and building up, we need to have something for all of those, somewhere for those feelings to go. There needs to be we need to have something, whether, and this is again the beauty of kind of the way of the artist. Like, artists find a way to channel this stuff into something creative. And not everybody, doesn't have to be through the arts, but how can you do something? You can have a conversation with a friend much like the one that we're having right now.
Yes.
That's a creative act. That's doing something with it. Explore this thing. Explore those feelings that you have. Like, ask questions. These are all creative things to do. And when you begin to engage with that capacity that you have and that every human being has more often, you start to become artful at it.
Like that, I think that's the thing. Every conversation that we've been aiming to have with the Way of the Artist, direction that we took this whole thing that we started doing, was really like, how are you going to make a masterpiece? How are you going to make art out of your life? Because your life is creativity or it's destruction in a lot of ways. And you're either building something, you're making something, whether it just be a relationship or a job or or a project or a product or something. Like, we're always in the midst of creating or destroying. And I think that it's a conversation that I don't think at this point everybody wants to have. I think some people just want to be entertained. They just want to be distracted. They just want to, they just don't want to think about it. And I think that's fine, because that's where they're at. But I think there's enough people out there who want to have that conversation. And I think there's more and more people. I really truly believe, and this is just my opinion, but I think it's more and more desperate. I think people want it more and more now than ever, because when the world is kind of going to shit around you in a lot of ways, like our economy is just going to absolute shit right now. Like the public health situation is going to shit. Like, there's just so many things. Like, social media is making our world go to shit. There's so many things that are like causing problems that people are forced to face that they didn't necessarily have to look at before. And when you hit that point, enough is enough. You start to look for answers. And I'm hopeful that these conversations are those answers that people will look for, that they'll look to something and go like, hey, like, I've been looking at my life this way for however long I've lived. And what if I did look at it like it was a masterpiece? What if I looked at this like a piece of art with all the dark spots and all the little bits in it that are not so great, but then all the light and what if I looked at it as something that I could create? And there's this Friedrich Nietzsche quote, and I want to just read it because I think it's
you're gonna bring in a little bit of Nietzsche into the room.
Yeah,
Okay.
But this is a good quote, and I mean,
he's got some good stuff. He had some ideas, that guy.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, considering his points of view, if you ever do any research about him, like, it's interesting that he said this, but his quote is this: one must give value to their existence by behaving as if one's very existence were a work of art. Let me read that again. One must give value to their existence by behaving as if one's very existence were a work of art. And I think that's kind of the point. That's the thing that we're trying to take on with these conversations. And these conversations didn't necessarily start there. Like, we didn't go like, let's do this, let's have talks about this. But they evolved into that because we started to realize, like, I don't know. I'm hitting this point. Let me just kind of bring it this way. I'm hitting this point where, first of all, I had all these plans for this year, and then COVID hit, and it screwed up my social plans. It screwed up my traveling plans. It screwed up my movie making plans. It just screwed everything up, and I was going to move down to, like, I was thinking of going back down to Los Angeles, and then Los Angeles got lit up with COVID, and it's like, all my friends are like, don't come here. It's like not good. Everyone's hiding away. It's, whatever. I'm just like, okay, fine, fine, change the plans, you know. Then, you know, whatever, some other stuff, but like just go more recently. Then we get a forest fire. This forest fire is in Oregon, you know. Now smoke, like if anyone's ever watching this on video, you just look behind me. It's just smoke behind me. It's all smoke. It's totally cut out my view. It's a sunny day right now. You can't even tell. It looks like it's foggy, but I have beautiful sunsets that are on my deck. Can't even watch them right now because it's just smoke. It just looks like an apocalyptic scene. Then the other day, I go camping in this, right? And I'm like, whatever, I'm out in nature. I'm making the most of it. I come home that night, my fucking city lights on fire so badly that like the flames, you can see them from the road. They're just like massive. Like there's a rating on fires. This fire was massive, like extremely dangerous. On top of that, this fire lit up all this toxic shit. So now the air, not only is it smoky, now it's toxic. And I don't know how to explain this to people, but when you walk outside of my apartment, when you walk out, like I'm lucky. I live in a nice place that's like air conditioned and like protected, like our air filtering system. A lot of people don't. But you walk outside, it's so bad. It's like acid hits your lungs. It's terrible. It's like one of the most horrible things I've ever breathed in my life. It feels like you're in the middle of a fire that's like burning plastic. It's so gross. And that's just the thing. Like, I'm just like, all right, you know what? Like I was like, I could deal with this. I could deal with that. I could deal with this. And then this thing happened. And I'm just like, I'm telling you, like, I'm just like, it triggered something that has been resting, I think, dormant inside of me, which is that, you know what, there's a lot of shit that's not okay, including this. And obviously I'm not able to change this. Like I can't wave a magic wand and make this different. But there are things about my life and the way I'm being and the way I'm behaving that I can make different. And I think that these conversations call people to action to say, why don't you take a look at this and consider if the way you're going about your life is really the way you want to be going about it. And maybe this will give you a kick in the ass or a nudge to take your life as a little bit more creative than destructive. Because like right now, I'm walking that fine line. I could just go like, fuck everything. I don't care. And I'm telling you, there's a big part of me that wants to do that. There's another part of me that's like, okay, what do you want to do with this? Like, how are you going to be in this? Right. And also not ignoring these feelings that I'm having, which are rage. Like I'm so angry. Like it's, but in a healthy way. Like, and I want to really share that. I'm angry because it wants me to create positive change. And it makes me not want to be so passive in my life. And it makes me want to not let things go that I've been letting go. And I don't know what this is going to make of me, but I feel like I'm walking through a valley right now, and it's ugly and it's scary and it's dark. And I'm going to come out of this. And who am I going to be when I come out of this? That's the thing that's playing for me.
Yeah. You know, some of what you're touching on with this whole subject of, you know, over it, is that there's very often, if not in most cases, there's a deep sense of loss that comes with that over it. There's a loss of some kind. You know, there's something that you feel should be happening, or there's a way that life, you wanted it to go or expected it to go, and it's not going in that direction. So there's a really deep sense of loss that comes with it. And with loss, there's like a sense of, there's a grieving that comes with loss, and pretty much any occasion. And, you know, we have to honor that to a large degree, because very often, you know, like anger is, as many people have said in the past, is like anger is kind of a superficial emotion. You know, like usually if you go a layer or two deep, there's something else, and that something else, I think, is a grieving, it's a loss, it's you know, there's a sorrow that's going on there, you know. And like just from the things that you were saying, you know, there were these plans, there's these trips, there's these hopes and expectations, and there's really nothing that can be done about it, you know. There's no going around it. And there are glimmers of light at the end of this thing, but there has to be the acknowledgement of the loss and the grieving that is or has occurred.
Mm-hmm.
Because on the flip side of it, you know, like something else that was coming up for me as you were talking was about appreciation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, appreciation can come in after these feelings have been looked at and addressed. Because I know because like I've got the smoke like crazy like that smoke is everywhere. I have friends on the other side of the country who said like it was supposed to be a sunny day the other, like, and they said it's like, and it was just smoky.
You just moved to like such a beautiful spot with an incredible view looking over the ocean, and you made this move, and you've put in all this work, you know, to get there, and like then you move there, and then this bullshit with the smoke has come along and it's taken your view, and it's taken all of that, and it's like this kind of stuff. I mean, you know, maybe I don't know how you're reacting to it, honestly, but to me that pisses me off for you. Like it's like, and well, all of this started because some gender release party about some family wanted to share the sex of their baby. Like how, like, and it's just like, you know, one person, like one little family, like two people maybe, caused all this damage. They destroyed a whole little town. They destroyed this massive area of forestry. They've naturally like affected like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people because of this little thing that they did. And there's something about that can really piss you off. You know what I mean?
That's breathtaking, man.
Yeah.
Like I actually didn't even know that.
You didn't know that? That's why that's why it's all smoky back here.
Yeah, like I didn't know that was how the fire was caused, you know. It's just like this sometimes in the summer and whatever, like it's this part of the world, the Pacific Northwest and whatever, like forest fires are pretty common yearly, but yeah, that's breathtaking. How something like that can just set a chain of events off. But yeah, like it's right, because like, yeah, like there's definitely a part of me that's irritated and is sad about it, because, you know, we moved here and, you know, pre-smoke, it was just like we were enjoying just the beautiful view of, you know, like the ocean and the island in the distance, and, you know, just like it was a huge part of the reason why we came out here, and that's definitely been that has definitely been imposed upon, you know, to another level. You know, I think this is important to acknowledge, is that like I am aware because I can hear somebody out there just being like, oh, you're sad about your view being gone because you can't see it. There are forests burning down. People are losing their homes. It's like 100%. Like it's a really, in that context, it's a really small thing to be irritated about. But it doesn't mean that I don't still have my right to have an irritation of it. You know, like I have a certain level of perspective around this whole thing. But to come back around to like appreciation, it's made me appreciate the, like, just what it's like when the skies are clear and blue and I can see further than 100 meters out my window. You know, like there's, and also knowing that this too shall pass, as the wise words have been said over the years. You know, this will pass. You know, this is not forever. Does it suck right now? Yeah, I can acknowledge that there's a certain part of me that's just like, this sucks. Mm-hmm. This is, you know, this, I don't want to be outside. Like I said, like the forecast is supposed to be sunny today. It's supposed to be like blue skies and like, you know, beautiful warm weather, and it just looks like it's like worse than a foggy day, you know? Like fog is at least kind of like, there's a kind of a brightness and lightness to fog, but this is just this heavy, hellish kind of, you know, like when you look at the sun through that smoke, it's just this unpleasant kind of orange color. Like it's very, like you said, like it's very apocalyptic. Like it's something that you would imagine in some sort of, you know, hellscape from a science fiction novel.
I gotta say something. I feel like we gotta be super careful, and I hear what you're saying. Like some people's houses are burning down. That's honestly way worse than dealing with some smoke. So I'm grateful that hasn't necessarily, like, that hasn't happened to me or somebody that I've known personally. Like, but I get that there are people out there, and there's always going to be people out there who are dealing with far worse stuff than most of us are dealing with.
Yeah.
But I think we have to be very, very careful about comparing our tragedies to each other. And enough is enough. You know, like, for example, I was in an abusive relationship, and this sounds super weird to say as a guy, because to me, like, I just was like, guys, maybe there's guys out there that abuse women. This is how I used to think. I used to think that there was guys out there that abused women, like physically and verbally and whatever. But I didn't know what emotional abuse was. I had no idea. So I was in this relationship that was like very emotionally abusive. And I remember a woman pointed that out to me. She said, "You're in an emotionally abusive relationship." And people were kind of telling me, like, maybe you should kind of move on. And I was just like, nah. And I just thought of myself as like invincible. I just didn't.
Yeah.
And when the relationship finally ended, I remember, and I think this is important to give context, I remember looking back at it and be like, I'm so dumb. Why did I stay in that? That was so obviously so bad, but I couldn't see it until later. And I knew something was wrong, and I knew things were getting worse. And there was many times where things were so bad, I should have just walked away, but I wouldn't. And because I used to just say, well, people have it worse than I have it, you know, like I can deal with this. And really, like, a toxic situation is a toxic situation, and your tolerance level, you know, if you're comparing that, you're like, well, I shouldn't be upset because other people's houses are burning down. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't be upset. You can be upset about whatever you're upset about, and you're allowed. And I think that we live in a culture that constantly tells us you can't be upset because your problems are not as bad as mine, or your problems are not as bad as theirs. And that's bullshit to me, because you're allowed to be upset. And there's things that, like, worse things that are happening that we don't want to happen to us, but it doesn't mean that what's happening to us is okay, and we need to be okay with that just because worse things are happening. I mean, you know, there's a certain point where you have to kind of like go like, I'm upset. These are just my emotions. I'm not comparing, like, someone else is upset, and it's not about me comparing how I feel and they feel. This is me living my life, and I'm upset. And that's what I want people to hear. It's okay that you're upset. Even if you didn't get the cupcake that you wanted, it's okay you're upset. It's okay for you to acknowledge that feeling, as silly as that might be. You might even go, I'm upset. Oh, it's silly that I'm upset. But you acknowledge that you were upset, and that is an important part of the healing. If you pretend you're not, and you tell yourself it's not okay to be upset, even if it's over something benign and stupid, like, when you put it in context of someone's house burning down, I'm like, yeah, it's probably silly I'm upset about smoke or losing my view, comparatively. But I still get to feel upset because I still am, you know. And I think it's important for people to know that,
because that's the reality of the situation,
right.
And it doesn't mean you're always going to be upset about things. And, like, you know, there are things that, you know, I used to get upset about that just, you know, they just don't bother me anymore, because I've gained a certain sort of perspective around it, to a point where, you know, there are things that don't even faze me anymore.
Right.
You know,
but
you know,
you dealt with it.
Yeah, because you still have to go through it, and you know, there's always something to be revealed through the acknowledgement of whatever is happening, and you don't always have to know exactly what it is. You know, like, we've talked about this before, but it's an important one, you know, which is that you just being able to acknowledge emotionally where you're at, what you're feeling.
Right.
Like, that's massive, because sometimes, like, what it's all about, what it is all about, that comes later. Because again, you could be upset about a million different little things, right? But we can't the emotion can cloud things so much that, like, you can't see it. You can't see the forest for the trees anymore. Like, it becomes too murky that you have to just first be like, okay, I'm upset. Don't know why I'm upset. Don't know exactly what it is. Maybe you have a general direction of where it is, where it's at. What's the thought? What's the idea? What's the event that's spinning around that's keeping this thing going? Just be with the feeling. Be with the emotion without referring to any kind of thought around it. And you can just be with that. And then once you can be with that, there's a little bit of leg room, to begin to look at it. It's just like, okay, well, I'm angry because I'm angry because I didn't get the last cupcake.
I love the cupcake.
And it's, like, it works because it seems so trivial.
Yeah.
You didn't get the last cupcake, but I don't know. I've been upset over not getting the last of some food piece, in the past. It happens.
Yeah.
But it's like, then you go, it's like, okay, well, am I really upset about the cupcake? It's like, well, it's not just about that cupcake. That cupcake is about something else. Usually, like, there's this thing that you can follow. If you're very attentive and you're careful, you can trace it back, and it's just like, oh, I realize that I've been putting my wants on the back burner. Like, this is just an example, but like, it's one that I've come to in the past before. I'm like, oh, I've been putting what I want on the back burner, like, for a while now. I was helping someone with this, and then I let this happen, and then I said I was okay with this, and I was okay with this, and now I'm at a point where it's just like, I haven't allowed myself to have something that I want. And I just wanted that fucking cupcake. And I didn't have that, right? And it's like, so it's not about the cupcake. It was about this pattern of things that was going on. It was about things that you might have been letting slide, over and over and over again. And now the cupcake is just that representation of that thing, because it's almost always about something deeper. It's almost never about just that one thing.
Right.
It's usually connected to a larger theme that's playing out in your life.
I think you found the key to this whole conversation, honestly. I think that's really what this is about, because when I stopped to think about my upset feelings recently with this fire and the smoke and the COVID and all this shit that's been going on, it's like, this is just the cupcake, and it's just representing something that's been going on a bitch bigger scale, or kind of underlying scale, if you want to call it that. I don't know, but it's like, it's funny because the thing you're upset about, like, I want to watch the sunset. I want to sit out and have a beer, and I want to watch the sunset. And that's not an option right now, at least not in the way that I want to do it. And that's my cupcake, which sounds probably benign and stupid to most people, because it's a cupcake. It is. I mean, it is.
Yeah.
But, like, it's this, I think the way you kind of put it is like, it's me going, I keep putting what I truly want on the back burner. I'll do it later. And now all of a sudden it's like, I can't do it. I can't have it. And it's like, what if you can never have it? You know what I mean? And it's like, you better go and start doing the shit that you say you want to do. Like, this year was a real fucking kick in the balls to me. It was like, I wanted to go travel Europe. I have enough money. I can go do it. COVID fucking hit. like I've been working out my financial situation to be able to live the life I want to live, and I figure it out, and then COVID hits, and it's like, well, now traveling is an issue. And it's not that I couldn't go, I could still go, but there's consequences. Now I have to kind of figure out, do I want to pay those consequences, and do I want to take those risks if I go? For one, I live in Canada, and if I come back to Canada, it means I gotta quarantine for 2 weeks after I do my trip, which could be an issue for some of the other things that I built in my life. And I have to balance, like, is that like, so this situation has really made me kind of go like, are you really like just making excuses and putting off what you really want? You know, like, because I feel like we all play that game. Like, how conservative should I be and how safe should I be versus how much risk should I take in my life and how much should I put myself out there? And we all have to find that balance. And for me, I think it doesn't matter how safe I am or how risky I tend to be. It's me making peace with how I want to be and actually honestly, authentically being that. Because, you know, for example, like, yeah, there's going to be an inconvenience, but like, are you willing to like say you could never do that and that was your last opportunity? You know, I think we have to look at our life that way to some degree. I think people who are risk adverse assume they have lots of time, and they assume that they can just do it when it's more comfortable. But people who are risk takers tend to be like, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to do this, so I'm just going to do it, and I don't really care. But I don't think one is better than the other. I just think that's a perspective on life. But I think we have to sometimes face that, like, they say you don't really know what you want until it gets taken away from you. And I think like moments like this, some things have been taken away from me, like the air that I'm breathing, not just COVID air, like fucking toxic air. Like, very few people that I know have experienced what I'm experiencing right now. It's like being in war. Like, imagine you walked outside and you're like, oh my God, like just walk into my car from like a block or half a block. I'm like, I don't even want to breathe. I'm like, I should have a gas mask on. This is horrible. Like, this is so ridiculously bad. And it's like, I've never experienced just the very air that I'm breathing maybe not be breathable. It's a frightening feeling. It's a fucking, like, it's a debilitating feeling. I don't even know how to describe this feeling. It's bringing up all sorts of stuff, and it's making me just think like, wow, man, like, you know, you just take so much for granted. And I think in some ways I'm angry that I take things for granted. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm not even angry about this stuff. I'm angry that this is how I do my life, as though I have time, as though all this stuff I can just kind of be like, oh yeah, I'll always have air and water and all this stuff that I think I should have. You know, it's like, well, what if you don't one day? You know, it's like, I don't know. Like, it's just making me kind of get like antsy. It's bringing feelings up, and this conversation is making me realize that, like, yeah, the cupcake was not having the cupcake was the thing that pissed me off in my perception. But what did that cupcake represent? What did that mean? What was all the stuff behind that? And I think I don't know what that is entirely yet. I'm gonna have to walk away from this conversation and figure that out. But I hope that, you know, maybe other people hear that and they do the same, because I think, you know, that's why we're angry. Like, as a society, as a culture, I think we're all a little bit like, yeah, like, shit, you know, there's something behind this that I'm not looking at.
Well,
wow. Okay, man.
You're
not having
I'm not having a beer. I'm just I needed the caffeine stuff today for this one.
You're having a nice brew. Well, we do share a beer on the podcast as a tradition, so I will share mine. This one's by Barnside Brewing, and it's called Foggy Fields. And it's actually kind of perfect. It's so freaking foggy out there with the smoke. India Session Ale. Yeah, it's been good. It's a nice, tasty beer. 2 thumbs up. I like it.
Beauty.
Yeah.
Beauty. Well, let's wrap this one up. I'll go first.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know what we were going to talk about today. But I'm glad that this came up, because, it's definitely a feeling that comes up, you know, I think frequently enough for myself, and I think for a lot of people. I think that the strange blessing is that if you clicked on this, you know, I imagine it's because it's there's something about it that's just like, yeah, I need to hear something about this right now, you know, because in some way you're over it. You are absolutely over something, some situation, something that's going on. Some of it's in your control, some of it is absolutely not. The good news is that that's the best place to start. Because at least when you're at the point of you're over it, it's an acknowledgement of how you're actually feeling. It's an acknowledgement of what's actually going on for you. That there's no hiding from this. There's no getting around whatever the situation is. You're at the point where it's just like, okay, whatever the hell this is, we got to deal with it, you know. And I think that we've kind of found some really interesting ways in which we can deal with it. Obviously, again, there's the acknowledgement. I'll again say it's just like, if you don't have a creative outlet for these things to go, do yourself a favor, find a place for that to go, you know. Just, and whatever what's the first thing that just popped into your mind as I said that, you know, if you don't have a thing, what was the first thing that popped into your mind? You know, like the first sort of impression. There's probably something in that for you to go and to explore, see where that ends up taking you. And what else do I want to say about this at the end of this one? Like, there was a lot of great stuff that we talked about in this conversation. But I think that, yeah. I don't know if I've got anything else to say. I thought I had something else, but maybe that was it. So yeah, if you're over it, it's a good place to start. Find a place to put that. And I guess I would, to kind of what we're saying at the end of this conversation, is that, look, whatever the thing is that it looks like it is that's kind of set this whole thing off, dig a little deeper into what that's all about. Is it the cupcake? Is it really about the cupcake, or is it about what the cupcake represents?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that you brought that in. What does the cupcake represent? It's such a funny little analogy, but it's like getting cut off in traffic, or, you know, someone budges in line, or you have to wait an extra day for something you ordered, even like weird little things that upset us, right? And it's like, I think that looking deeper is a really good start to kind of, you know, and I think that instead of putting anger or these upset feelings on something else, I think we really want to kind of like look in and go like, well, how am I being? How am I doing my life? Because I think most anger really comes from that. I don't think it actually is something we want to blame and attribute to other people as much. Although we can acknowledge that that triggered us, I don't think we want to cast all the blame on that and say like, it's you caused me to be this way. It's like, no, I caused me to be this way, but you triggered it and made me see that I'm not living the way I want to be living. And that's kind of the thing that I would want to kind of push for everybody to look at, you know, as they walk away from this. Is just like, are you living the way that you really want to be living? And if you're feeling upset feelings or anger or even sadness, whatever it might be, like maybe you're just not living the way you want to be living. So look at that. And if I was going to just say anything else, you know, you mentioned something earlier in the conversation, and I want to just bring it up here at the end, that not a lot of people have a healthy expression of anger and upset feelings, and they don't have outlets. And I would really encourage all our listeners or anybody who's tuned into this, find an outlet for that. You know, find a healthy, creative, passionate, loving outlet for these things that are inside of you. And I'm grateful to you, Evan, because we have this conversation. I have you to talk to, and whether we were recording this podcast or not, I feel like this is a conversation we would end up having. And I'm grateful to have a friend that actually wants to hear this nonsense that's going on in my head and heart. But I think that if people can go out there and build friendships and relationships where you guys talk about the real shit, not just football or shoes or clothes or some weird thing that we talk about all the time. It's like, talk about the stuff that's in your heart that really matters. And you might not be able to bring another person right in there right away, but these are the conversations that I think we need to have. And I think they're what clear the path for our creativity and our art. And I think that, as unrelated as this may seem to your life as an artist, I think it's absolutely vital to the whole thing. I think it's absolutely a part of the whole process. And I think sometimes the indirect way to where you want to go is sometimes the best path you can take.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you got something out of this, if you feel it improved your life or your journey in any way, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, or share the episode.
You can also support us on Patreon, where we have tons of great bonuses. You are the ones that make the show possible and help us to thrive. Thank you for joining us.